So today I get to talk to you guys about growing carrots and lettuce in pots. I love growing in pots because it is so versatile. It can be done with just a small balcony space. This is part of the Calgary Horticulture Seed to Table initiative, helping us to learn about growing our own food, using our own food, and reducing waste. The first thing that we're going to want to do when we are growing veggies in pots is to make sure that we have drainage. Drainage is really important in pots because otherwise the water just sits in the bottom of the pot and your plants they they get waterlogged and they can't take up oxygen. When drainage happens, it allows space for oxygen to enter the soil and the plants to breathe. They essentially can suffocate from the roots if they're always in water. There are certain plants and there's hydroponic systems where that's different. Something different about a hydroponic system is that the water generally is always flowing, and this introduces oxygen into the water. There are other plants that, just like we have sea life, there's certain plants that don't mind wet roots, but for the most part, and for carrots and for lettuce, we're going to want to make sure we have some drainage in the bottom of our container that we choose. You want your pot to be deep enough. If your pot is too shallow, your plant will get to a certain height and it will suddenly stop growing, especially for carrots because they are a root vegetable. They have a tap root. So a tap root is something that has one root that grows quite long and goes down. Tap root plants, also to be noted, you don't ever want to transplant a tap root. They don't do well. They don't love being transplanted. It's not that you can't transplant a carrot, so that's where you might start the seed inside and then move it into a different container. But if you do that with a carrot or most taproots, you get a really weird, wonky looking carrot. That's where you would get something with, the three legs that are hairy. So if that's what you're going for, if you want to grow some fun carrots, then maybe you could transplant them. But for carrots especially, you want to have 1.5 times as deep as your mature plant will be tall. For carrots, look at how deep you expect the carrot to grow. So if it's going to be a 10-inch carrot, you want to try and get a 15-inch deep pot. Hopefully that makes sense. It's also important to note that the color of your pot matters. The material of your pot matter. Black pots are going to heat up more during the day. Whenever the sun's shining on them, those roots are going to be cooking hot. There are certain plants like tomatoes and peppers, squash, cucumber. Those are some of the heat-loving plants. Basil loves heat. Those are ones that probably would like to be in a black pot against the side of a house. But carrots and lettuce, they're good to combine in a pot, partly because they both like things to be a little bit cooler. They like their roots to be a little bit cooler. They like the sun. They do like direct sunlight, so this can be confusing to find somewhere with direct sunlight, but somewhere that isn't baking hot. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in some of these slides coming up. When you're growing in pots and when you're growing in a garden, the quality of the soil matters. You want to choose really high quality soil. This is the base for what we're growing. Just like as people, if we feed ourselves a lot of unhealthy food, we're not going to feel great. We're not going to do great. But if we provide a ton of nutrients, really good soil, the right um, the right thickness of the soil, the right porosity, however you say that, that matters. Soilless mixes are actually a great option. You might think, what? Soilless mix? Maybe that term is new to you. A soilless mix is truly doesn't have actual soil in it. Usually they're a peat moss base. Peat moss is not the most sustainable soil, but some of the other ones are sustainable growing medium. Some of the other ones, coconut coir, is something that is a little bit more sustainable. And the thing about the soilless mixes is are sterile, so you don't end up with as much mold or maybe aphids. Although when these pots are going outside, that's not such a big deal. Personally, I love the Pro Mix BX. That's a really good one for growing in. And then I like to add some compost to my containers. A good quality compost can provide nutrients all summer long. And vegetables especially like to be able to find that consistent nutrients in the soil. I love sheep manure. It's a little bit higher in phosphorus, which is good for the root growth and it's good for the carrots. Llama manure has become popular, rabbit manure, something that's broken down, a compost that's broken down. I don't personally recommend the city compost for growing vegetables just because I know things like dog feces and cat feces can be in there, some other things that we don't know about. So those are wonderful for fertilizing shrubs and trees and foods that we're not going to be eating directly from, but something like carrots that you're growing right in that soil. Maybe look for a compost that has broken down more. It's been heated up and that its base is something you might be a little bit more comfortable eating, but that is entirely up to you. I love to add worm castings into my soil. Worm castings are very nutrient dense and they also make plants more tolerant of drought conditions. Because containers dry out so quickly and it's harder to maintain moisture levels, having some worm castings is a really good idea for your vegetable containers and actually for your flower containers, for all your containers across the board. Some carrot varieties to grow in pots, you might want to look at a shorter variety like Chardonnay. As mentioned, you need quite a deep pot for some of those bigger carrots. So if you have a big pot, go ahead and do some of the bigger carrots. But if you have a shorter growing season or a shorter pot, then look for a shorter carrot variety. The Nantes carrots tend to be very popular. Those are some of my favorite, but they can grow quite long. They can grow up to 12 inches long. So maybe those aren't the best for your pot. There is a variety of carrots called sprint carrots. They grow quickly and they're harvested at a smaller size. So that might be perfect for your pot because you have limited space in a pot. You might want to look at some of those short season carrots. You might want to consider a variety with shorter days to maturity. So depending on when you're planting your pot and when you want to harvest, even just being in the Calgary area, we often have less growing days than places around us. Even Edmonton can have more growing frost-free days than us. So when you're looking at the seed packages, you'll see days to maturity listed on there. Sometimes it's just a number. It might be something like 80 or 60, but that's usually how long it takes from the time you plant your seeds to the time to harvest. Note that days to maturity is based on ideal growing conditions. We don't have ideal growing conditions almost ever, so just keep that in mind. See if I can get to my next slide here. This is my daughter with the carrots that she grew in her garden a few years ago, and I just want to share some tips for growing carrots. As mentioned before, direct seed. This means we're not transplanting. We're not starting them inside and then moving them into a different container. We're seeding right into the container we want to keep them in. It's difficult to spread out carrot seeds evenly. You can try pinching them in your finger and just kind of sprinkling them around. You can try shaking them. Let's see if you can see my hand. Kind of shaking side to side and sprinkling them. You can try seed tape. However you do it, you likely will need to thin your carrots a little bit. I like to plant my carrots the end of April. For some reason, April 26th stands out as a day that I think is often warm and sunny, and I managed to be able to get my carrot seeds in the ground. Only reason that you might want to plant them a full month later is if you know that you have carrot carrot rust fly in your area. If carrot rust fly isn't an issue. And that would be noticed when you harvest. You kind of have veiny, like dirty veins all over your carrots. But if that hasn't been an issue, start your carrots early. They don't mind a little bit of cold at all, and you'll end up with bigger carrots by the end of the season. Plant into some loose, well-draining soil. You don't want your soil to be like a hard brick. You want something that is porous, that does the carrot, that taproot can get through easily. And the biggest tip I have for people who struggle to grow carrots is you want to keep the seeds moist. You want to keep that surface soil moist until germination. Carrots, you're not planting them very deep. You're planting them and just sprinkling a little bit of soil on top of them. That's the easiest way to plant your carrots. And that soil, if it's in the sun, it's going to dry out really quickly. If your pot's movable, I would put my pot inside to germinate so you don't have wind drying off the surface of your soil. And then set something like cardboard or even a layer of saran wrap or whatever you have on hand, a lid from a bin, set that over your pot. And if you have carrot and lettuce seeds both at the same time in your pot, if you planted those at the same time, you can cover both of them. And actually say this, but I backtrack on that. Lettuce likes some light to germinate. So unless you're using saran wrap or something the light can get through, maybe sow your lettuce a little bit later. But lettuce seeds also like to stay moist. So you're going to want to keep your pot consistently watered, not drowning, not sopping wet, but so that there's some moisture in the top until germination. Carrots usually 10 to 14 days, and you start to see some of them poking up. Once you see some of them germinating, you can lift that cover off. If you go to check under your cover and there's carrots that have germinated, but you see they're bent over, and you think, oh no, I'm killing my baby carrots. It's okay. When you take the cover off, they'll pop up and start growing. It's not going to harm them. You'll get better germination rates or sprout rates. Then you want to thin to about one plant every inch. You might be able to get away with one plant every 3/4 of an inch. If you're going to harvest the in-between ones, kind of like a checkerboard, before they start to touch each other. If they start to touch each other, it's just going to slow down their growth and you'll get smaller carrots. I do like to thin mine, and then you could call it a second thinning, although the second thin, I eat those ones. So middle of July, I think, maybe even the end of July, I go through my rows of carrots and I pull about every second one. And this allows the rest of the carrots to grow. And those are the ones that I save for the winter because they're larger by the time I harvest them in the fall. For lettuce, some tips for growing lettuce is you want to choose some bolt resistant varieties. So lettuce especially doesn't like getting too hot. So as mentioned, the pot matters. The color of the pot matters, and then what the pot's made out of matters. If you have a cloth pot, it's going to dry out for one a lot quicker. If you have a big ceramic pot, the temperature is going to be more even inside your pot. So a ceramic pot would actually be a really good option for growing lettuce and carrots. A plastic pot is going to heat up a little bit more and cool down a little bit more. It's not going to maintain that more consistent heat. I get that in pots, we're not going to have totally consistent, but some of them are a bit more consistent than others. So just think about what type of pot and then where we're going to place the pot. I think we talk about that in the next slide. Just as with the carrots, we can direct seed. We can start them indoors anytime from the end of April to June. Succession plant. So consider planting, maybe 2 lettuce seeds 1 week, and then 2 weeks later, 2 more lettuce seeds, and then a couple weeks later, a couple more lettuce seeds. And this way you have young, fresh lettuce all summer long. I personally would plant 3 seeds per wanted plant. So I said 2 seeds, but you want 2 plants. So that would be 6 seeds. It would be 3 seeds here, 3 seeds there. The reason I would do that is because lettuce seeds are teeny tiny, they're hard to work with, they're not that expensive, and when you're planting in a pot, you don't want to end up with empty spaces. We don't have a lot of space to work with here. We want to make sure we're filling the space that we have. Seed packages might recommend having your lettuce 12 inches apart, but when we're growing in pots, we can actually condense that space and we can grow them a little bit closer together because they're getting better light, they're getting ventilation. You can get away with crowding plants. So I would do about every 6 inches for each lettuce plant. So yeah, now we come to where to place our pots. So we've talked about the fact that we don't want these pots to be overheating. So you don't want to place them against a south wall. A solid south wall is going to be one of the hottest places for your plants. This is where your tomatoes and your peppers and your cucumbers are going to go, those heat-loving plants. For our lettuce and our carrots that like it a little bit cooler, we might put them against a railing. A glass railing might also heat up quite a bit, but something like the railing shown in this picture with the bars on it that allows the ventilation, that would be perfect. That would be a really good place. You do need minimum 6 to 8 hours of sunlight to grow carrots and lettuce. 6 hours is not going to be quite enough. For carrots, I would say they're going to be really small. 8 hours is better. If you can find somewhere with 8 hours of sunlight, so watch your deck, watch wherever you're thinking about placing this pot, and time how long that area has sun for. Make sure that your plants are going to have minimum, hopefully 8 hours is what we're going for of sunlight. And carrots and lettuce, one bonus about them is they actually tolerate the wind really well. We have plenty of wind in Alberta. We have, unfortunately, lots of hail. One good thing about root vegetables, about the carrots being under the ground, is that a little bit of hail, they might look terrible, but often they actually come back surprisingly well. And lettuce is the same. If it gets hit with hail, trim it back, clean up all those dead leaves, give it 2 weeks, and I bet you will get a lot of great regrowth on it. So those are some of the things we can do for pot placement, pot selection. And then what about fertilizer? People always wonder, should I be fertilizing my vegetables? We do fertilize flowers. It's important to fertilize flowers, but vegetables prefer to get their nutrients from the soil as a consistent nutrient. So as mentioned, the worm castings and the compost, those are going to be good fertilizers. Those are going to add that nutrients all summer long. You don't need to use fertilizers are often labeled by numbers. You don't need to use 555 or even a 222 for your carrots and lettuce. If you would like to, as long as those numbers are all low, 5 or less, probably isn't going to hurt them if you're not doing it more than once every 2 weeks. But if you did start with quality soil, you don't need to fertilize your carrots and your lettuce. Lettuce is great. It's a cut and come again. So with lettuce, you can cut it down, leave about 2 inches at the base. Yeah, about 2 inches. And then it will regrow. It does become bitter eventually as you do that. I find I usually can harvest lettuce 3 times, and after the third time, it starts to get a little bit bitter. And that's the point that I might pull it and toss it out. But if we succession seed, if we plant intermittently, we'll be able to have that lettuce for longer. You might wonder about this fertilizer here. I make fertilizer tea that I love to use for my vegetables. Maybe that's another course I could talk about, but I like this picture because it looks like they made a fertilizer tea from things they grew in it. So yeah, I hope that you guys are excited about growing some food in pots in whatever space you have and making the most of that space. And I do want to say thank you to the City of Calgary, who's offered up this partnership for this Seed to Table initiative that helps us learn about growing and preserving food. I hope you have a chance to be able to do lots of growing in the coming season. Thanks for watching.